Hello, Sylvia.
Ohio.
That's pretty good. Ohio. I see what you did there. Ohio was mentioned in the previous episode several
Obviously,
times. Yeah, well done.
she knew that.
Before we get into today's episode, any thoughts about the new Pope?
As rotten as a bucket of apples that have laid in the sun for 2 weeks.
Yeah, surprising, Sylvia. I thought you were going to say something neutral. I'm going to say, yeah, I think everyone look into this fella. I thought it was funny that the world media was like, oh, this is a new Pope means a breath of fresh air. And I thought, unlikely. This is an ultra-conservative Catholic from Chicago. Not exactly what I'd call a breath of fresh air.
The air is as stale as... No, I won't go down that.
All right,
I'm
maybe
joking.
you got there now with one of those. So, yeah, just everyone, just look into him. His name is Robert Prevost. He's not a god. He's a man. Look into his past and his career and what he was up to in his hometown of Chicago when he was the head of the Augustan sect of the Catholic Church, whatever it's called, sect, strand,
Congregation.
Strand of Catholicism.
In a nice congregation.
Yeah, all right.
Way.
Yeah, so look into it. That's all I'm gonna say. Make your own decisions. Anyway, we have some new friends to welcome. As I can see from my internet buttons over here, I can see that the previous episode with Rowan that tackled some emotional topics related to transgender issues has attracted some new followers and listeners. A warm welcome to all fellow travelers. Anything you want to say, Sylvia?
Transgender identities, not transgender issues solely, is it? It's positives of it as well.
Yeah. No, I'm saying anything you want to say to the new listeners.
Sorry.
Sorry already. All right, good. Sylvia says sorry for
Can
everything.
I just add that there's some censorship to how much I'm allowed to speak right now that I don't feel comfortable with.
Yeah, sorry will work. Sorry for everything I've said and will say on this podcast. All right.
That makes sense.
Sylvia's absolved me of my sins. See, I brought it back to the Pope.
Well, that I can bring it back to that quote of Oscar Wilde where it was like, it is not the priest who gives you salvation.
Absolution.
There you are. It is the confession itself.
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Boom. Oscar Wilde. So the way it works over here is that we usually have a little bonus episode in between full-length interviews with guests. And in those I can sometimes be a little unhinged, would you say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But you've apologized, so we're fine. But this is also pirate radio, so sometimes we can break the rules. And today we also do have a special guest in this episode as well, which is a nice bonus. Before we get to our conversation with Jeffrey, we have some admin and feedback. First of all, remember to press the internet buttons on your side as well.
They're all on the same side, Danny.
I choose not to view the world that way. Anyway, do the internet buttons, review, comment, subscribe, all that shit. As you'll hear in today's episode later, this podcasting game can be hard work, and those little things do help. So share with a friend. I'll even provide a template for how you can share with a friend. You send a link, for example, to the previous episode that you like so much, and then you write,
Hot girls.
hot girls near you, less than 1 kilometer away.
That's what I thought you were going to go down.
No, you send the link and then you write something like, oh my God, OMG, you won't believe what this idiot said about transgender people. You see, you gotta trick people and bait people. That's how the kids do it on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We also have a special shout out to a new friend called Arda.
That's a very cool name.
Yeah. I hope we pronounced it correctly. Anyway, there's no rhyme or reason to who gets a shout out, right?
No.
In Finland, they say the jelly beans of life are not distributed equally. That's
Well, I think we need many more Finnish sayings because they are all quite sort of anticlimactic but true.
Yeah. Basically, in this case, you didn't get the jelly beans. Someone else got them. So if you want to shout out, you just got to send an email to talkingasspodcast@gmail.com. Engage more, and we will engage with you. Yeah? Regarding the feedback for the transgender wrestler episode, well done to all of you. It was another super contentious topic, maybe. I didn't think it was that contentious. But we received 0 comments calling anyone any nasty names or anything insensitive, really, at all. And Jeffrey and I actually later point out in this episode how surprisingly positive the internet can be sometimes.
Sometimes.
And the Talking Ass community has proven to be a nice bunch so far.
As opposed to its leader.
Yeah, much nicer than someone like me deserves, right?
It does not reflect the leader.
In this case, attitude does not reflect leadership.
Have you got any Finnish proverbs?
You know, it's a line from it's a line from the movie Denzel Washington, Remember the Titans. In Remember the Titans, he says, attitude reflects leadership.
There you are.
Yeah, great film. So, anyway, speaking of the internet, find today's guest's impressive catalog on the Jeffrey Van Leeuwen podcast. The logo is like a lion, and his whole operation is very professional. He's got artwork and good audio and video and the whole shebang. If you enjoy this show, then his episode about negotiation is a good way to get into his thing. It's the closest thing to something that I would do here. And of course, yours truly has appeared on his show recently. So if you can't get enough of your favorite independent talk radio journalist of questionable morals and societal standing, then go listen to that.
Did you behave on his?
Oh, yeah. Super professional. Yeah.
Behavior.
Yeah.
Go and watch that to see the difference.
Yeah. So go watch or listen to me on that show to hear the difference, I guess. Yeah. I'm so smart on his, and I'm such a moron here. Anyway, Jeffrey's a friend of the show who's doing his own very cool thing on the internet, so we appreciate all the support. But I must warn you, this guy's voice is mesmerizing. He's like a benevolent cult leader. I don't think he's selling anything or trying to get you into any kind of group, but I'm just saying as a compliment, he could if he wanted to.
I definitely think I'm vulnerable to cults.
Yeah.
Well, it can be a test. I'll listen and.
All right, let me know if you got roped in. All right, enjoy the chat. All right, welcome, Jeffrey.
Thanks for having me, Daddy. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. First of all, the name. Give us the correct Dutch pronunciation.
Good question. So, Jeffrey, I bet you can do that one, but the surname is Van Leeuwen.
Leeuwen. See, because I thought it was an
yes.
F. I thought it was an F, a Van Leeuwen or something, and then I thought, wait, this is all a big joke. His actual name is Jeffrey Funloving, right?
Yeah, it's actually the English version would be translated to of lions. So Jeffrey of lions. So it's the animal in plural. But yeah, it's a surname that a lot of non-Dutch people get wrong in their pronunciation, which is not very weird. It's quite one of these confusing Dutch names, let's say.
Yeah. Well, for everyone, all of my listeners in the English-speaking world, you can find Jeffrey's fantastic podcast under Jeffrey Van Leeuwen, right?
Very good. Yeah, very good.
That's the English pronunciation. Yeah.
Yes.
How weird is it to like try to make a new friend in your 30s or whatever? I'm assuming you're in your 30s. I am. And why do we have that thing where like after age 25 we set up this massive wall where any more friends are like it's all awkward and it's not the same, right? Then you start prioritizing the friends you've already made.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going on over there, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is that as a child, I think you are way more inclined to go on adventure, right? You don't have the barriers built up yet in your mind that have been set there by experience. So the whole world is like a big adventure, you know, every kid that you find is a new adventure and they can introduce you to new games, you know. In my case, for example, you know, I had a couple of kids around the block who always got themselves into trouble, you know, making these small little fires for the old people around the neighborhood, or a couple of ones that got like video games and those kind of things, which was all super interesting. So it's very easy then to connect with other kids, and you don't necessarily have the trauma. Well, not necessarily trauma even. Let's just call it bad experience. I don't think they have the bad experience of like things like betrayal or fights or, you know, things going wrong in your life later on, you know, or that competitive element that's people get into in their career, for example. Kids don't have that. So I think as you grow older, these barriers will be set into place. And if you let that stay there. If you lose your openness, if you lose your willingness to explore and to ask and to connect and to figure out new things, then I believe those barriers that you set in place over the course of your lifetime, they will prevent you from connecting with people and making new friends. I think that openness and that willingness to ask and to connect, that's super important to have, not just in your 30s, but yeah, in my case, I'm in my 30s, but I believe also way beyond your 30s. Yeah.
Yeah. And in this game in particular, like you started a bit before me, but when you get into something like this, like putting yourself out in the public eye or ear in terms of a podcast, you very quickly realize that you're going to have to put your big boy pants on and like be vulnerable and connect with people and introduce yourself almost like a kid in a new class in school. Like, hi, my name is, and it feels awful. And this is a thing I'm trying to build, and I'm trying to find people who are maybe building a similar thing. And then you just put it out there. And obviously the internet's an awful place, but you just have to take that. You're just, you become a little child in a sense.
Hey man, I've listened to a couple of your episodes and they made me chuckle quite a bit, and I think the guests that you had on were also very interesting. So you're definitely doing very good on that front. So keep doing what you're doing. That's what I will say. But in general,
and congratulations on yours as well, because so go find the Jeffrey van Leeuwen. Yeah, no,
that's a different city in the country. Leuven. No, it's Leeuwen. Yeah.
Leeuwen, yeah.
Yes.
So find that podcast. It has like a lion logo. Fantastic. I love that thing with the negotiator. I felt like I did a degree. It's like an MBA in negotiation, because surely when you're actually doing those degrees, all you're focusing on is partying and networking and whatever that means, and chasing the opposite sex or the same sex. And it's like you listen to that thing and you're just, all right, now I know. Now I feel like I can go into a boardroom and nobody will run circles around me, right?
Yeah. It was definitely a very interesting conversation to do. And George van Houten, he was the guest in that specific episode you're referring to. Very interesting guy. He's from my home country, so from Netherlands. And if I'm not mistaken, he's a corporate negotiator and as advisor. So he's a partner at the European Negotiation Institute. So pretty much if you run a company, right, and you want to do a takeover of another company, or you need to get a very big deal done or something along those lines, but you don't have the experience yourself to do any negotiating, and you don't have anybody in your company who can do that for you, he's the kind of guy that you hire to negotiate on your behalf in order to get the best deal possible. Ideally for yourself, of course, because that's why you're hiring him, so that's the outcome that you're looking for. But in the best case scenario, a negotiation doesn't just favor one side. It's a collaboration between two or more parties trying to reach the optimal outcome. So, it was definitely a very interesting conversation to have, especially given his credentials.
And you have this amazing ability, for those who enjoy the more serious parts of this podcast, to just remain deep in a topic without having to stray away into a joke. I feel like I have to puncture the air. Every half hour I have to say a silly joke to like puncture the air before I move on to the next question. You just dive so deep. The conversation with the poet, she seems like a fantastic person, by the way.
Get, beautiful lady. Yeah, really wonderful person.
Yeah, what's her name?
Huguette. It's a French name. I mispronounced it earlier as Huguette. I thought that was how you pronounced it, but apparently you pronounced it as Huguette. Yeah.
French-Canadian poet, is she?
French-Canadian, yes.
Yeah, and in that, it's like you guys get so deep and philosophical, and I'm thinking I could never maintain, like, I have to make a joke after a while. Well, yeah.
Hey man, more power to you. If that works, that works. And to be quite honest, it's not just a perk. It's also very much in some sense, it's also a personality flaw, because some topics and some subjects you don't want to delve right into, super deep into, right? So if you're at your office job, for example, and I don't know, the conversation on that day is about football or whatever, you don't want to ask the deep philosophical questions, but I'm the guy that does that. So I'm the guy that usually can be quite heavy for people to have a natural, light conversation with. So I'm not sure if you're noticing it in this conversation as well, so let me know if you do, but that's generally the direction that my mind usually goes, yeah.
That's your thing. You're like a modern day sage, like this deep mesmerizing voice, and then really getting into the depths of how people think about a topic is great. By the way, where do you find these people? Are they from your professional life? Like, what's the...
So it's a mixed bag. Originally, I was part of a community at a certain academy. So that academy started somewhere last year. I will not mention it by name, but it's an online academy. And there were a couple of there was a community forming over there, and there were, I believe, 1 or 2 people that were interested in interviewing other students. And they were looking for people to interview. And I was like, sounds cool. Let's have a conversation. Sounds like a good way to connect with someone else that apparently has the same interest as me, which is learning, right? Because that's why we were there. That never took off. It never came off the ground. For some reason, I never got the invitation. I guess the person just lost interest. Also, never saw the person again on that environment. So then I was like, okay, why not do it myself? Why not invite people myself? It was an idea that I already had for a couple of years. Since the Corona time, I started listening to podcasts myself, right? Like guys like Andrew Human came a little bit later, but Lex Friedman, for example, or Jocko Willink, or these kind of guys. Super interesting in the conversation that they're having. Amazing conversations, and that really attracted me. The ability to really connect with people in a conversation and to learn with them and to explore with them and those kind of things. So that idea then settled during that academy time in my mind, and I was like, why not do it myself? And yeah, that's where pretty much the podcast started. It started very rudimentary. It started with the general idea like, hey, I didn't even know a platform like the one that we are using right now existed, right? That there was software out there that would facilitate podcasts.
Yeah, I made my first episode, and you can probably hear it in the audio quality. I just made it with a local recording and edited it manually.
Yeah. I had the same thing and the same idea. Yeah.
I just started with some conversations I'm having in my life, they need to be recorded. So I'm just going to do it. And then I started learning about all this stuff, and now it's a little bit more... Yours is way more professional already, obviously, than mine. But maybe part of the charm of this thing is also that it's a bit mom and pop shop, right? Like it's a bit like garage metal or something.
Yeah, it's very fun the way that you're doing it. So I listened to a few of your episodes, including the one that you brought out earlier today, where HR was a big topic in that episode. It's quite funny. It got a couple of chuckles out of me, especially when you did the rating with the... What was the question that you got? It was like 1 to 5. 5 mostly agreeing and 1 not agreeing at all. And the question was something like, I take credit for, or no, I give people credit for their work or something like that, right? And your answer to that was brilliant. So anybody who's listening right now, go check that episode out. It's brilliant. Yeah. Very, very funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to have that. Because part of it is also like narcissism. My personality isn't only... I have the same curiosity as you, that I want to create this like educational, valuable thing. But also that would be a lie to pretend that I don't like to just sit down and make potentially awful jokes, right? Yeah.
Hey man, authenticity, be who you are. I think that's the most valuable thing. And if I listen to you and I'm getting the feeling like, hey, this is Danny, right? This is just his personality. Then you can also be consistent over time. And then I know that if I tune in 2 years from now, assuming that you're still ongoing, and if I hear you correctly, you will be, that's your intention. But I will hear the same Danny, more refined, of course, more professional maybe. And you will be better at whatever it is that you want to do, but you will still be Danny, you will still be recognizable, and that's very important.
Exactly. And by the way, what you said about those online academies, I had considered them as well as like, what would you call it? Maybe like adult further education thing that we all become interested in. We want to keep developing in our 30s and into our 40s and 50s, hopefully. But prices were an issue. And then, my own university is always sending alumni different courses and stuff. And it's like, yes, I'm interested in the topic, but I don't want to subscribe to you. Like, what if I lose interest in a week? I might just want the intro to this topic. And then I don't know why it took me so many years to just figure out, well, wait, do it yourself. And, hopefully maybe teach others along the way.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, man. Can you, as a lighthearted question, can you tell us about what is up with the wooden clogs? Does anyone actually wear them in Holland, or is it all a tourist trap?
Yeah, the klompen. I didn't even know that the English word for it was clogs, but yeah, it's a thing. It's a cultural thing in Netherlands. You don't generally see people wear them anymore, only like on King's Day, where we celebrate the birthday of the king. Then people will go outside in their orange outfits, with their cheeses and their clogs, drinking beer all day long and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I believe from the old time it was something that people used to wear. Mostly, I think farmers and working class people, I suppose. Not really sure who wore them, but yeah. And they're not comfortable at all. I don't know if you've ever had them on. They're not comfortable at all.
No, I can imagine. But I've heard this somewhere, and I can't give credit to who taught me this because I've forgotten.
Hmm.
But the word sabotage, like the word for wooden clog is sabot in French. And the word sabotage came from some like workers' right movement where they would put these clogs, their wooden shoes, into the machines at a factory and break the machines. And that's where sabotage comes from.
They used to throw those shoes into the machines to sabotage the machines.
Yeah, like some kind of, it was like a workers' right movement, like a strike or something.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Never heard of that. And that was in France, you said?
Sabot is French, so I think it's in France, yeah.
Right, okay.
I have to rely on your Dutch connections, like find a clog guy for us, or a
The
clog
claw
girl
guide.
who can come explain all this to us.
Yeah. So the city that I was born in, Delft, is a beautiful city. So if you ever come to Netherlands, certainly make sure that you go to the city of Delft. But
Delft.
the further you get to the centrum, the more of these kind of shops show up, right? And those big cheese shops where they have these big round cheese, just laying in the window, maybe 80, maybe 100 of them, right? And many cheeses. But also these clog shops, these klompen shoes shops, those kind of things. It's part of the culture. It's beautiful to see. Nobody walks in them, like I said, but it's definitely one of the things that are really fun in Netherlands.
You can guarantee that when I visit the Netherlands, that I'll be going in those everywhere.
Oh man, let me know when you're here.
But we just received some of our first listeners from the Netherlands, so this is good timing. No one has sent in anything yet, which is disappointing because if you're gonna be somewhere in the world and listening to my weird voice, then let us know who you are, right?
Right.
Yeah. Tell me, a lot of your content is like this, how would I say, you're a more business-like person than I am, but more like maybe professional-oriented skills, like leadership, negotiation, things like this. Why did you develop an interest in that? Were you a manager somewhere or like in a leadership position?
Yeah, so I'm a project manager right now, but I wouldn't say that that's the reason why I'm interested in that. And the thing like leadership, negotiation, communication, empathy, that is something that I have a deep interest in for exactly the reason that we discussed in the beginning of our conversation, right? That ability to connect with people and that ability to create friendships with people and to understand people and to know what they want and to facilitate them and all those sorts of things. I believe now in my 30s that is a crucial skill for everybody to have. So then for obvious reasons, right? Because that's how you connect to others. That's how you excel in your business. That's how you become successful in your marriage. Those are people skills. Those are skills that are universally applicable everywhere. So then the question is, how do you develop those? And the answer to the question is with a lot of stumbling. And that's the honest answer. There's a lot of stumbling in there. So I'll just fast track it over here. So feel free to interject if you have any more questions in between. But I started my first company on the day that I became 18. So that's legal age that you need to be in order to be able to start a company without consent of your parents. And that was a video game journalist company called teachdb.nl, which is short for the game database.nl. And it was run by a couple of students, including me back in the day. So we were like with 8 students or something like that. And what we were doing is we were tracking the news as it came out of the video gaming industry, right? But you can imagine it as in my case, 18-year-old. And before it became a company, I was already running it, the website for a couple of years. You can imagine that motivating and not necessarily motivating, that's the wrong word, but to organize students in such a way that the pipeline of incoming content stays open as wide as possible and all the major events are covered. And when there's, for example, a conference in Germany, that we are there, right, to cover it. That requires a lot of organization, a lot of people skills. And that's where that stumbling started happening, which is logical because, nobody starts out as a leader, you have to learn that. But fast track it forward. And I actually up until this moment, and I'm 34 right now, I've always had leadership positions in between. So as you grow older and as you want to make sure that you organize, you inspire, you lead and you facilitate and you help and you listen and you do all those sorts of things, right, that are needed to run effective teams. You need to learn how to negotiate. You need to learn how to communicate. You need to learn how to connect with people. And there's a lot of different material out there. There's a lot of different books. Some is good, some not so much. But what you need to do is in my personal opinion, you need to be interested in growing that skill. Then you need to look for which material can help you with that. You need to learn it. And it's not just a matter of reading and now you know it, right? You need to put it into practice. So try it, struggle with it, stumble, make as many errors as you can, right? Because the more faults you make, the more data you have to work with, the more things you can look at, like, hey, this was good, I should keep that, and that was bad, I should remove that, I should not do that again.
It's so impressive that at the age of 18, you would even start understanding that this is going to be a process, and I'm gonna have to keep track of what I'm learning and how to apply it in the next stage. Because at 18, I was just running around. Of course, later I figured out that some of those experiences are valuable and you build some kind of data set, but you have your own business already, so you're probably physically tracking this in some kind of systems, and you're having a self conversation about this and how to develop. Is super impressive. By the way, did anyone listen to you when you were 18?
Well, let me just quickly clarify, because I think I misspoke there. It's not like I was tracking that data when I was 18. It was more like I got into my first leadership positions around that time, and for my 15, 16 years old, something like that. So it was not like I was tracking what went wrong to the degree that I am right now. Right now, I'm really data driven, right? So I'm looking at what I'm doing, what the effect of it is, and trying to learn from it. But back then, it's more you do it, you stumble, and if it goes wrong, you have a fight that you have to solve, right? And then you have to think about how you're going to solve it, right? So it's more the moments that it went wrong, those are the moments that will trigger reflection, right? As a young, unexperienced person, the moments that I made big mistakes and the moment I got into trouble because of that, or I made decisions that weren't the good decisions, I got instant feedback, and that feedback was, for example, an angry person. That feedback was, for example, a fight. Then you need to do something with that. And so that's more like the stumbling that I was referring to. Later on, as you mature more, then you can become more efficient in looking at what you improve and what you keep. Hope that makes sense.
Awesome. Yes, lots of sense. For me personally, leadership has always been like I'm definitely not a natural leader, but I'm also not a natural leader. If you catch my drift, like in many places from early youth, like you said, at 15, 16, I don't know, in a summer camp, it's only some kids that are then invited to be counselors to lead the next year's camp to the younger kids or whatever. In all those things, yeah, I was often in that group. And then later on, I just became so critical of everything that my personality type would definitely be an outsider critic rather than buying in. In the rare cases where I've bought into what we're doing, whether it's at work or on a sports team or wherever, then I have been part of the leadership group and I have held those positions. But often what happens is I observe the situation, let's say a certain workplace, for 18 months or 2 years. And then I start understanding that it's all bullshit wrapped in more bullshit, and I lose belief. Therefore, you can't have me long term as a leader. You see what I mean?
Right, yeah. So you kind of, so it sounds to me like you were kind of looking for the most efficient way to lead, and you noticed some problems both inside the circle and outside. Right? Am I summarizing it correctly that you were still kind of figuring out what your leadership style was and how to properly move forward in that specific situation? Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yes, always. And then what I would refer to as a backup, as a safety option, was always leading by example. So I always believed that the reason I got the position in the first place was because I had the skills or knowledge, as in I was good at what we were doing. Therefore, if you kind of lose track of how you're meant to lead this group of people, then what you can always revert back to, if you're good at the actual thing, is just lead by example and show that you're good at this, right? And this is how it's meant to be done.
Yeah, that's the so in my personal experience, that will be the technician that has social skills, good social skills, I mean. So the person working, for example, on a help desk, doing the actual work, him or herself, and being very good at it, right? Understanding perfectly how the systems work and how those processes work and how everything integrates with each other. But at the same time, they have the capacity to not necessarily inspire others, but to organize it in such a way that it becomes clear for other people what to do properly and how to help the team in the most effective way. So what's the word for that? Is that a foreman? We call it, in Dutch, we call it a meewerkend voorman, which would translate to a collaborating foreman, I suppose.
Yeah. Norman the foreman. Yeah.
Norman.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I think that was like my thing, which at the end of the day, that means like middle management style positions in corporate life will be the ceiling, because everyone can see that this guy is too critical and poking too many holes into the whatever it might be, the product or the company ethos or whatever. Therefore, like, he's good and he has a good work ethic and the people around him like him. Therefore, he should have this team. But both them and I always knew that this isn't a VP or a CEO or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So I believe a lot of people like me end up like middle management, kind of. That's the ceiling, right?
Well, no, yeah, I suppose in most cases you will be right. I don't think necessarily that's the ceiling per se, because an option that comes to mind as a potential, well, first of all, you can grow, you can learn, you can refine yourself, right? So the better you become at understanding how everything works in a bit, the better your communication and your leadership skills become, the more responsibility you can take, and the more responsibility you can take, the higher position you can take within the hierarchy of a company. So it is not unreasonable to think that a person like that who keeps developing themselves might end up, for example, within that same company as chief technology officer or chief operations officer, something like that, a board level position. But the other end of the spectrum is, you can also ask yourself the question, right? If you have the personality type that wants to keep on growing, wants to keep on developing themselves, there is a ceiling of opportunity within the company that you're working for. And the moment you hit that ceiling, and it's not necessarily your ceiling as a person, but it's more like the ceiling of the opportunity within the company itself. If you hit that ceiling, you can ask yourself the question, am I happy here? Is this what I want to do for the next 10, 20, 30 years, maybe until you go with pension? Do I want to continue? And if you want to continue, well, that's where it gets interesting, right? Because now all of a sudden you have a decision to make, and the decision can be something along the lines of you stay within that company, you do your thing, but it might also mean that you start some side businesses, or it might also mean you start setting up your consultancy business, to consult on whatever it is that you were good at. Or what we discussed, I think, before the conversation, right? You can do things like teaching, which I believe is an absolutely beautiful thing to do, right? Coaching and mentoring people is absolutely wonderful. So, yeah, man, the sky's the limit.
People always shit on that profession, and it's so unfair. It's one of the hardest things to do. You've, I'm sure, done a little bit of it. I've done some, and it's not easy, and it's probably relates to this leadership as well. Like, leading kids or managing a group of kids is one of the hardest like management jobs you can have, and we pay them nothing, we give them no credit. Depends on the society. In some societies, I don't know, Germany, Finland come to mind, where actually these are very respected positions in society and jobs that are hard to get. But in a lot of societies, it's like this throwaway conversation teaching, and that's what almost we should aspire to be, teachers.
How much do you think it is the times that we are living in? So I have a very vague perspective on it, because this is something I'm not delving too much into, and I have contacts within the academic world with people that I really respect. But teaching is not perceived as virtuous as it could be within today's society, and I'm really wondering where that is coming from.
It depends, I guess, on the society. I mean, Americans have been complaining about how the teaching profession is down the toilet for decades, right? Whereas you don't hear the same conversations in certain Northern European countries, for example. So I think it depends on where you are. Obviously, internet culture is kind of universal. Everyone's watching the same videos in the English language everywhere around the world, hopefully including ours. So maybe on the internet there would be at least potential to sort of unify around valuing teachers, because all your content creators, if they do smart, legitimate content for the smarter listener, let's call them that, then they are all teachers, right? In a certain sense, that's the whole thing they're trying to get at, is to put something valuable out there in the world, right? So on the internet, at least, I guess culturally there will be an opportunity to worldwide change the perception of teachers.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's one of the most wonderful things a person can do, I believe. That whole concept of mentoring a person, inspiring a person, and helping someone grow. I'm not sure where I got this from. It might be a podcast from someone else, so it's definitely not my words. But someone I listened to referred to mentoring and teaching as a variant of fatherhood, right?
Yeah.
Masculine fatherhood. Because you are teaching a person how to become competent. You are helping them grow. You're helping them get their roots down in the big world. Right. And I think it's an absolutely admirable thing for people that really focus on helping others grow. and that are incredibly generous with their wisdom and with their skills and with their time, that is absolutely wonderful. And it feels to me like way too many people in the world right now have ever had the experience of having a proper mentor in their life. And that's terrible.
Yeah, many of us never get that in professional life. So if someone asks us about a mentor, it's going to be a teacher from high school or even middle school, because that's like a formative stage, maybe puberty and all that coming along. So very few people, you ask them about a mentor, do they mention someone who's like, yeah, my manager at work? Like, that's a lucky position to be in.
Yeah, it happens. Good mentorship is very valuable, I think. But okay, so there's one side note that is very important here, I believe, to put in there, because it is a two-way street, like you said earlier with leadership. It's not just about waiting for the proper mentor to come over to help you out. That is not how you find a mentor. You find a mentor by searching for them and by asking them. So the tip that I could instantly give here, and I hope you can attest to this or at least provide your insights into it. Don't let people that inspire you just pass you by, right? If you see someone who you think could mentor you or who you think could really like help you get your roots down in the world, ask them, right? Ask them. So in my personal experience, if somebody asks me that question, well, first of all, I want to know if they're serious about the question, right? Because I'm going to ask a lot from you, right? I'm not just going to give you a couple of tasks and good luck with it. I'm going to ask a lot, and I'm going to make that very clear, very upfront. But if the person is committed, if the person really wants mentorship, man, that is such an adventure. That is so beautiful.
Yeah. And it brings us back to the beginning of this conversation. You got to put your big boy pants on when you need something like this. I guess what you learn when you actually put yourself out there and make yourself vulnerable and ask for help, you learn that even on the internet, the vast majority of people are really happy to help, and they hope that you will do well. And even in normal life, your neighbor might always have a grumpy face. But if you then talk to him or her, suddenly you realize, like, actually, they're happy to help you fix the fence or whatever, right? I don't know. There's a greater point here about open your mouth and just connect with people.
And there's a story there as well, right? If you see him passing you by every day and he has this grumpy face, it's not because he's necessarily grumpy. It doesn't mean he's a bad guy, right? It doesn't mean that he wants you harm. There might be pain behind those eyes. There might be a story behind those eyes. And without connecting to that person, you will never figure that out. So what people do too much is assume someone else's intention, right? Assume someone else's position, right? We reflect our own mind onto the world, and then we think we have the answers before having asked the questions, right? If you ask people for a favor, generally they are more than happy to help you out. And yes, I have the same experience as you. There are some situations where the reception, for example, to the podcast or to any other online thing wasn't as warm as you might want to, and that's perfectly fine. That is part of the deal. Let's be honest, it happens. Yeah. And with you probably a lot because you're asking for hate mail in your mailbox. So I can imagine it's a thing. But
obviously, I asked for hate mail, and then I shoved in a Middle East episode as like the third thing I ever put out there. So,
man.
But do you know that even with a contentious topic like that, the vast majority of feedback has been constructive and interesting. I think some listeners struggle to express what their point is, so I can't read those on the podcast, but I'll tell everyone right now that I have read them and we read it all. But the vast majority is not just like some kind of ethnic slur or like hating. That's tiny minority of people. Those are the ones that hurt you and that you remember, because for some reason we focus on the negatives. But
because you have to be afraid of who eats you in the time that we still had to run from leopards and all these other animals. Yeah. You're very focused on the negative because those are dangerous to us and might kill us. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a very old primal instinct, I guess. And focusing on beautiful things can provide a whole lot of value, not just to yourself, but to everybody around you. Yeah.
So pretty. We should end with that, but since you've listened to a couple of episodes, you know what time it is, right, Jeffrey? You got any public service announcements? Anything you want to leave the people with?
Announcement.
Yeah.
Man, I think I would just repeat what I said before, what we discussed before. Don't assume someone else's intention, right? Ask questions. Connect with people. There's a whole bunch of skills to learn out there, right? So if you want to read books, if you want to get into the subject matter and be better at it, there's Google it. There's more than enough to find out there. But in general, I think human connections are not just one of the most beautiful things. I think it is the most beautiful thing in the world. Yeah, try to focus on that.
Mine will be firstly go and listen to more Jeffrey sage-like deep conversations on the Jeffrey Van Leeuwen podcast, and don't be complacent. And maybe this will come up more when I appear on your show, and people can find that and listen to maybe more of my views on things. But don't get complacent, even when it comes to jobs and this could be even countries and their defense, right? Like complacency kills you. You got to keep moving forward, keep learning. Even if you're happy right now, just inflation will make your salary worth less in 2 years from now. So you got to move in some direction, whether it's laterally or forward or backwards or whatever. Keep moving.
Yeah, when we make the jump to my podcast, let's start with that, with the complacency thing. I think that's a very good opener. So let's use it as a follow-up for this one.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny, for having
Cheers,
me.
Jeff.
Bye.